What is happening? What we're gonna do today, we're gonna take you a little ride on this S197. Got some errands to run. It's gonna be the longest trip since I've done the swap, besides going about 5 miles down the road to do another errand, but now we're doing about an hour total trip. And I'm gonna give you my thoughts on what I think of this swap. And obviously I'm always a big fan of doing this swap, Coyote Swap in the S197s. 05 to now 2010, we got the harness out for, as you know. And kind of some of the other quirks I've learned on this one. Also, something I didn't know about that I'll get into later about the fuel system. So let's go. Yeah, here we go. Windows up. And we're off. The AC's low. AC's going. Hear those pipe bombs. Now, one of the most common things people ask me in the swap is, from the videos anyway, so you have a check engine light. You have a check engine light. What's that all about? Well, in this particular car, it is two things. First code, which shouldn't actually work. Exhaust is really low. Stupid speed bumps. Usually I straddle those. Anyway, where was I before the speed bump bit me? It is for the, it did pull a code though as the skip shift solenoid, which is odd because the MT82 doesn't have that, where the GT500s do. It says that the circuit is low because it's obviously not there. So it's really interesting that it's pulling that code without hooking up to HPT tuners or whatever, HP tuners. I can't turn it off myself. And then the other code is emissions related. So we can get in front of this traffic here. To do with the fuel tank pressure solenoid or sensor, and they're just two different styles on these cars. So it's obviously in the fuel tank, and it's not in the fuel tank, it's in the evaporative system. I'm getting a reading on Forescan showing pressure, but on the PID, but I think that the sensors are just not compatible. They are different connectors between the Coyote and the 3 valve, so, and they are wired different. I'm going to try and, because 1 and 3 are actually opposite, so I'm guessing that's why the voltage is all goofy. So I'm going to try and just rewire it before I go get a different sensor and see what happens there. But yeah, that's the two codes, skip shift solenoid and a little evap code. Other than that, that would be off, because this thing does have cats, and someone put foulers on it just in case those weren't enough to keep the engine, the catalyst efficiency happy. So yeah, that's one thing about the swap that's going on that people have asked. What is crazy bonkers here, as I'm driving down a surface street, is that the speedometer is probably the most precise or accurate of any car. Even my 2011 F250 speedometer is fast, and it's got stock size tires. But it's funny because it must be the tire size I'm using. The gear ratio is 331, tire size is 275 40/18, but the computer thinks it has a 355, but when I went through a radar, was spot on. So that's pretty cool. You know, I love the tip to start feature that you get when you swap these cars. If you don't know what that is, it's where you don't have to hold the key to start it. You just that's kind of an interesting little feature that works there, the way we have it wired up. You might have known that I mentioned in my videos is with the AC, the computer in the Coyote cars just worries about the high side, and then the low side on the Coyote cars is actually not a low side, it's just a temperature sensor in the evaporator core. So it just gets a signal from the high AC sensor. So it's always requesting it. It's never going to get a signal from the smart junction box to turn it off, so it never really knows. It always thinks it's on, so when the AC compressor is cycling, you get a little idle fluctuation, as you may or may not hear in the video. So something to be aware of, depending on the tune, because this is a stock tune. It does it a lot worse than my 07, which is, you know, that thing has cams and a lung tune. I never noticed it doing that at all. And another thing you might have noticed, in, man, it was over a year ago now, with my 07, and we talked about while I was driving, is this thing has a economic shift light, which just the other day I saw. I was talking about the 90s, but I aligned a Terminator, an 0304 Cobra, and, you know, took it for a test drive, and it had the economical shift light, where, if you don't know what that is, growing up in the 90s, and those are the cars that, you know, we got first. You know, I'm an 80s baby, but it's where you hold on to, like, let's say you're in first gear, you're taking off with a real light throttle, and you just kind of hold it there. It's going like 20 miles an hour. It tells you to shift for you know, fuel economy. It does that for every gear but overdrive. And so I thought that was really kind of interesting. But on this cluster, they must have thought of doing this, but for whatever reason, even though this is originally a manual car, there's an overdrive off light in the cluster that is being used for that economic shift light. So it might be part of that logic where the skip shift solenoid is coming into play, why it has a code. I might have to ask the guys over at Power by the Hour why it does that. It's or why the Coyote strategy has that skip shift solenoid when no Coyote car had that. It should have been just in the Shelbys. So I'm about to get on the 101 here in Arizona, and I've gotten up to 60 and cruise on the surface streets. They're usually 45, 50 mile an hour zones, but it's the first time I've taken on like the Freeway. I'll show you, you know, the cruise working and all that stuff, in case you don't believe me that it all does work. And I'm getting cold air. You're gonna have to take my word on that and all that good stuff. Still haven't quite dialed in why. Like, I've never had to shim a throw bearing, but this thing releases quite higher than my 07 that I swapped with the stock. But this has the MT82, so I don't know. There we go. Let's get on the 101 here. Not flooring it at all. There's school buses around. So now the overdrive off light was on there. I give it a little throttle, it turned off. Now turn back on with a little more throttle. Yeah, it's funny. to get on my exit here. We got no problems. My steering wheel is not centered. That's an easy fix. You adjust both tie rods, blah, 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 at the same direction. And used to angle kits. I made a small adjustment. It wasn't enough, so it's just a little tilted to the left to my liking. And so yeah, went from Glendale to over to Scottsdale, run some errands and whatnot. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this car and this adventure. And thank you guys for tuning in, of course. I never thought my stuff would be as popular as it's getting. I know I'm not a huge deal on the internet machine with YouTube or anything, but a lot of people seem to like the honest content. I'm not trying to be anybody that I'm not. Just looking for myself and what I'm passionate about. Thank everybody who has bought harnesses or guides the past year. And I'm going to keep developing products for this car and some other Ford stuff. So you know, we're sitting next to a Duramax here. Turn the AC off. That thing really does rumble a bit when the compressor. Oh yeah, delete it for sure. Let this thing sing a little bit before we truly get off. You know, with the cats and stuff and no headers, it sounds pretty good. It's like a perfect daily exhaust. It occurred to me there's one thing I didn't cover on my trip there, almost home. The traction control people have asked about is, unless you do some trickery with the ABS, bringing the ABS stuff from the 11 to 14 cars, your traction control will not work. The ABS system is a separate sort of entity system in the car where it can work if this thing didn't have an engine in it, because it uses separate wheel speed sensors. So it's just that the ABS module in the 05 to 10 cars don't communicate with the Coyote. It's just a more sophisticated traction control software or whatever. It just will not work. The traction control will just be off immediately when you start the car, which for most people is fine. Alright, we made it. My destination. And yeah, so probably gonna wrap it up here. I can't think of much else to talk about this car or this swap that on top of my head right now. Let's do that thing. Give me a like if you liked it. I don't care. Subscribe if you're willing, and we'll see you next time.